Pie. Welcome to ChinnyVision, the YouTube channel dedicated to real hardware, where today we're going to talk about emulation. Yes, and ChinnyVision mugs now available. Travel mugs. Put them in the car. Use them anywhere. Woo! ChinnyVision.com. That's the plug out the way. So yes, there's a deluge of mini consoles and computers, shall we say, available on the market at the moment. Now, you and I, we generally use our real hardware, right? We've got our Amstrads, we've got our Amigas, we've got our Atari STs, and so on. And we just use that. Occasionally we might use emulation because we want to get a snapshot made on, for the Spectrum, for example, ChinnyVision. I sometimes use the RZX archive to show later into games, and I create a snapshot, then load it into my Plus 2, and also testing stuff out. But these mini consoles and computers, we looked at the C64 Mini. I'm going to say it because it's the elephant in the room. We looked at the C64 Mini last year. I got one for under half price. It was extremely underwhelming, and I didn't really care for it. And I said at the time, for the same kind of money at full price, you could get a Raspberry Pi. And people are now talking about mini VIC-20s and all these other mini consoles. And I'm look, stop. Right, you're buying a thing that can just do one thing and not do it particularly well in some of the cases, and there are other solutions out there. So I wanted to work out what I could get for the same kind of money as a mini console, something that could do everything from the Spectrum to the N64, possibly even PlayStation stuff if you're into that kind of thing, and even let you run RISC OS, like the Archimedes and other things. So I went on to the Raspberry Pi Hut, which is a store in the UK, and bought a Raspberry Pi. I already have one, actually, but it's a 2, and this is the latest Model 4. So what did I get? Well, I spent £87.49. I mean, what's going to be in this box here, which is about the same, and that includes VAT, as one of the mini consoles. I've made an assumption that you, like me, will have lots of keyboards and mice hanging around. Look, there's one here. There's a keyboard somewhere over there, and I've got another USB keyboard just over the other side. I've got loads of them. So, right, I'm assuming, therefore, that you've probably got a mouse and stuff spare. So, what I bought is a Raspberry Pi, the relevant cables, and let's run through it. I spent £87.49. Thank you to the channel's Patreon supporters for that, by the way. Let's open the box, and I've only opened this to check what's in here. Right, I had to go in the order we've got here. I'll pull the camera out a bit. And apologies for different settings today, by the way. I just need to do this in the office because I've got more IT equipment around here. So we've got a HDMI cable. I need this because the Raspberry Pi uses the new miniature HDMI standard that looks like that, basically. It's tiny. So I needed to get one of those. So that's an extra cost you may not need to do if you've already got one. He says trying to put the plastic thing back on the end to protect it. We then have a Raspberry Pi power supply. Now there's a good reason. You're probably saying, I've got USB power supplies hanging around. This has, I think it's 5 amps. Sorry, it's a 3 amp output at 5.1 volts. I think I didn't have any power supplies that actually did a full 3 amps that I could absolutely rely on. Pis are a little bit fussy about their supplies. If you've got a 3 amp supply hanging around with a USB-C connector on it, then you won't need to spend the, how much was it, £8 on one of these. So again, you know, the cable and the power supply are my choice here. Pop those over there. And here we got the money shot. The Raspberry Pi 4 computer. I've gone for the 4 gig of RAM option as well, which again pushes the price up. I've not tried to skimp here and go just for the cheapest, just to show this off and show you what can be done. I've gone for actually something practical rather than the 2 gig. machine, so it adds £20, I think, to the cost of the machine. But in here, we should have... Right, so I've got that on the box, and here it is. This is the latest revision of the Raspberry Pi. And if you don't know what this is, it's basically a computer on a board. Well, actually, it's a computer on a chip. Chip's there, the RAM's there. The rest of the stuff on here is I/O. You get 4 USB connectors on there, 2 of them USB 2, 2 of them USB 3. You get Ethernet, dual 4K display, and you get a power input there, and then that's composite video and stereo audio out as well. And that's it. That's all she wrote, and that's what you get for your... That is the £54 model option. I think the 2 gig rather, is cheaper than that. It's £20 cheaper, and you can get the next one up, the 6 gig, I think is £20 more. RAM, you know, it's the cost of the RAM really that changes the prices there. There's no VGA, although I suppose you can use the HDMI to get that. But dual 4K display. Seriously impressive. And you've got that header there that's for your kind of projects and things. And that other header there is for the camera and different other projects. But what are we going to do on this? Well, we're going to build this, and we're going to install Retropie, which is an emulator that runs everything, basically. I also have in here a little nicety here. This is for the USB power supply. It's actually a on-off switch. This sits in line with the power supply because the Pi doesn't have its own one. So I've just got an on-off switch there. That was literally £3 to do that. Again, luxury, but I just bought that because, hey, I want to leave it plugged in. And finally, you're going to need some kind of case for this, obviously, unless you like leaving this dangling around. But also, the thing about these new Pis is they do get warm because they're much more powerful than the old ones. The reason I'm not doing this with my Pi 2 that I've got in the cupboard is because this is a significantly faster, better 4K display computer. So that's the reason I've done that. And I've gone for this aluminium armour case, which comes with some little tools. And I've got to put this together in a minute. Lots of different bits. And that's the base down there, and that's the top. And that will sit on there somewhere. It's basically a massive passive heatsink that will act as a case as well, and will look pretty cool. And it's in ChinnyVision blue. So I'm going to put this together. And then, well, the other thing you'll need as well, SD card, assuming you've got one of these around. Otherwise, you just kind of buy one. It needs to be a mini SD card to put the operating system on. So really, I mean, you're talking £100 if you want, well, top end, if you can do everything, including the keyboard and mouse, I say you're probably looking at £110, potentially, to run pretty much everything ever in a tiny, compact case. So we will see how this goes. Right, so I'm going to have to put this together then, aren't I? Always good. Are there instructions in here for how to do that? Of course there aren't. Of course there aren't. The Raspberry Pi thing has a diagram of things there. And so that, I'm guessing, fits on there like that. And then I'm guessing that will fit on like yay. Aha, right, that's how it goes. That's quite neat. Look how neat that looks. It's just like a giant 486 Pentium processor, isn't it? And we've got some screws and some heat things for the chips. Presumably, the big ass one goes on the main processing unit there. One for the memory, and, well, guess whichever one is that one next. I'll have to get close to this and have a look, won't I? Na, 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 na. I won't won't get a job in McDonald's making cheeseburgers, will I? Right, so we've got our thermal doodahs on. So let's get you in close. And also, if you're wondering why I'm not in 4K today, it's because we're going to have to do some capture from the Pi, and I don't want to start upscaling to 4K to do that. So I thought you could have lovely 1080p at 50 frames a second for the fast motion. Right, so that now goes on there. If you know what song TV theme tune I am humming, put it in the comments below. Mr. Chinny, cast away. I don't know why they've... Well, I suppose... Why have they not used screws here? I don't know. Get it nice and tight because you want those thermal pads to make contact. Problem with this desk is it moves, which isn't good, but so I've got all the IT stuff in the office, and then if I need something, I can just jump up and get it, as opposed to running outside into the office to get everything back into the house, and so on. So that's nice and tight. Right. And there we go. I need to now install it. There's an SD card slot somewhere on here. Where's the SD card? Oh, it's underneath there. It's there. Right down in there. I mean, this is a marvel of miniaturized design, isn't it? It's just so small and generally marvelous. Just look at it. It's just tiny. It's a pen. It's for comparison to size, and it's doesn't weigh much at all. Most of the weight's in the heatsink. So now what I need to do is prep the SD card in a computer to put the Raspberry Pi installation onto there. So to create your SD card with Retropie on it, you simply download the image from the Retropie website. You then download something such as Pi Baker, if you've got a Mac like me, or a Raspberry Pi imaging piece of software, which will be free. There's plenty linked on the Raspberry Pi site, so I'm not going to recommend a specific one, but what this does is it will write the image to your SD card that you've downloaded, because the Raspberry Pi uses a specific Linux disk format. So you simply put your SD card in, run the Baker software, it copies the image across, you pop the SD card in, and hopefully you'll be off and away. We should be ready to go. The instructions actually say I shouldn't need a keyboard and mouse for this, so I will need a joypad. So I've actually had the most difficult thing today so far has been finding an Xbox joypad in my big box of controllers, because it's been quite a while since I last used that. By the way, this is my last Raspberry Pi 2 for comparison. It's I don't know, cheap plastic case. It ran okay, but wasn't spectacular enough for me to actually use it as a regular device. It was a fun toy, basically, compared to just emulating on a PC or something. I've also found a keyboard and mouse together, built into one somewhere down here in case I need it, which I have lying around. Hopefully that's a dongle for it there. But most importantly, I need to plug in the power supply, which I haven't done yet. So let me do that. The good thing about the official supply, by the way, is how long the cord is. So let me just get this together. That's a general screen I have on my mixing desk usually, and it's quite useful, and hopefully it should work with this. The great thing about these videos is I can pause the recorder while... Let's try that again. great thing about these videos is I can pause the recorder while I scrabble around on the floor trying to find the cable that I've dropped. Okay, so we should have that is going to go into there, and that's entirely my decision to have an extra on-off switch. And then that goes into the Pi, probably there. Now, there's no fan or anything on this device. You can get a heatsink with a fan if you want to. Is the screen on? The screen's on. So it should be a case of just flicking the switch. Aha, here we go, here we go. It has a light on it, that's cool. Alright, let's see what happens. If any... Oh, it's doing something. It's detected something. I haven't got any ROMs on here yet, by the way. That's late, and apparently that's much easier than older versions as well. They can do things like connect over Wi-Fi to your NAS or whatever. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Look at this. Retropie. One of the criticisms I had of the old Retropie was that if the system didn't shut down cleanly, it could sometimes trash the SD card. But I've looked at documentation, it seems to be something that's solved. This is a first boot, so it's going to take a lot longer than it will usually take. Lots of stuff about daemons and so on, Unix stuff. Now, you don't have to... oh, here we go, welcome. You don't have to... You can install an operating system and then install Retropie on an emulation station, but I'm choosing a dedicated install here. And of course, all you've got to do is swap your SD card in and out for whatever you want. So you could have RISC-OS on one card, this on another, the Raspberry thing on another. One game bar detected. Hold a button on the device to configure it. Okay. It's detected it. D-pad up. Press anything. D-pad down. Press anything. Left. Right. Start button. Select button. Button. Oh, no, 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 I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want... Oh, can I go back? Is it going to let me re-choose all this because I've got it horribly, horribly wrong? This is going well, isn't it? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It's not okay. It's not okay. I've got it wrong. Mr. Grimsdale. So, first boot then after configuration. Hopefully it will pick up all the games I've loaded on here. I've only put a few on for things like the CPC. So we'll see what happens. Retropie. The video here is upscaled from SD. My capture setup is purely optimised for SD capture because I spend my life capturing old machines. So although the Retropie can run in HD, you're seeing all of this upscaled. It is just a way of showing you rather than pointing it at the monitor. So just keep that in mind. Here we go. Just starting up. And there we go. Amstrad CPC, 12 games available. Seems to pick up my MAME stuff, my Spectrum stuff. If you haven't got ROMs or images on the machine, you won't get a logo for that particular machine. So I put a small selection on here at the moment. PC Engine there. And one thing to note here, I'm running the Pi at 50 Hertz here at the moment. So if we boot up, say, Space Harrier, it may not run properly because if you're not doing weird capture things like I am, you'll just be running the display at 60 Hertz. You can change things like the refresh rate, the controls and so on when you start up each game, and you can save that nice and easy. You just press a button that you've configured on your joypad. And here we go, Space Harrier. So I'm imagining this will look quite jerky. Yes, it is. This isn't the Raspberry Pi. This is because I'm running Space Harrier, a 60Hz game at 50Hz in order that I can capture it and put it into this production. But I can assure you, having tried this separately, it is silky smooth at 60Hz, and you can run it all in HD, and you can put scaling options on and all sorts of things. This is going to be the most useful thing for me, actually, because getting a good MAME setup has been one of my wants for a long time. I don't have much emulation requirements, but a good MAME setup would be really, really useful. Right, so how do we get ROMs onto the computer, or the Pi rather? Well, we're platform agnostic here, so here I am on a Windows box. Two ways to do it. The easy way is you get the Pi onto your network. I go down there. There's the Pi. I go to ROMs and I just copy them in there via the Wi-Fi, and that's it. And there's setup options here. Lots and lots of setup options. You will need to familiarise yourself with these because there are things you need to do, like setting up your Wi-Fi and various other things, and clever things you can do with screen modes, so you can look at what screen mode you want to run your Pi in on your display. And a big tip here, although the Pi is 4K capable, don't try and run Emulation Station in 4K. It doesn't work very well because the refresh rate's available, and it's just ludicrous. Why would you do that? Run it in 720p or 1080p and let the TV do the rest of the upscaling, because frankly, if you're looking at a 320 by 200 game, why are you asking the Pi to upscale that to 4K? And there's lots of configuration options there. Too many for me to show you. One of the useful ones you want to do is install some more emulators, because things like the C64 and MSX don't come as default. So you go through here, you select Vice, you install it from a precompiled binary, it will download it all, and then you'll get a directory on your Pi that you can access via Wi-Fi, and you can simply just drag your C64 images onto there and it should all work. You can install things like the Amiga emulator, anything you want really. I'm not quite sure why they have some machines installed by default and some not. It might, and I'm just guessing here, be a copyright thing to do with the system ROMs. Because the Spectrum and Amstrad are on here, and of course Amstrad back in the 90s said you can freely use our ROMs providing you don't alter them or charge for them. But of course the Commodore stuff is a lot more hazy. So if any Commodore fans are going, why is it not installed? I'm imagining it is legal stuff and you just have to do it yourself. It's a very simple process though. So here we are, 2 weeks later. You are pointing at the screen, so you know it's easier than trying to do capture from this device, because the device is HD and all my capture devices are really set up for SD from old micros. But I found game packs thanks to the people on ChinnyVision Discord channel, and I've managed to download game packs for the Amstrad CPC. So if we click on that, we have about 700 games here, and you get a little video and description of what it is, and who the publisher is, and the year. That's 3D. Ooh. And Atari 2600 games there, which there are millions. Let's try Chopper Command. Here we go. Goodness knows what this is, but oh, no. Well, whatever it is, I'm not very good at it. Quit out of that. But you get a little video, as I say, and all sorts of different things. There's the Amstrad version. We can just click. Let me just select something half decent. If I can find some, not Captain Blood. I mean, you can add your own games in as well, though. If you add your own games in, if you don't add a little video and text description, obviously you won't get that. While the Magic Night series, nighttime, hopefully will just run. Get a little pause, and during this little pause, you can press the key on your joypad to configure the emulator if you want. Don't know if you can hear that or not. There's music going on my TV. Actually, probably my gating is killing that off. Yeah, it is. But it all works, and that's all you need to know. And I did also get an arcade pack. Now, the vagaries of MAME mean that you do need to have multiple versions of MAME installed. And but sometimes the game won't start and you need to restart it and just select a different version of MAME. You see how many games I've got here? I've got millions of them. Let's try Flicky. I'm trying Flicky because it worked earlier. He says in anticipation. Here we go. Do need a keyboard for this one. Just to select the MAME. And it all just works exactly as you want it to, really. So MAME is the most fiddly of them all. One problem I did have, and I just need to exit out of here with the keyboard. One problem I did have in all of this is my Atari 2600 menu kept on crashing. And I couldn't work out why. And I went onto the Retropie site, searched on it, a menu hanging in Retropie, and it simply said what you needed to do was go into your other settings on there and turn the video memory setting up. I turned up to 520. I also turned on my use OMX player hardware accelerated because, of course, this Pi 4 has better graphics in it. So, yeah, and that fixed all the problems. So, if you do hit a problem with your Pi, just go on the website, do a search, and chances are someone's had that problem before and it will all be fixed. So, I mean, that solved that because literally the Pi just hung completely on the 2600 video, on the 2600 menu, and all it was it wasn't able to play the videos properly. And I've also installed a Sega Master System emulator. Again, slight pause as it loads up. And again, I'm sorry you won't be able to hear the audio on this, but it all just works. And it's 60 Hertz, and it's all rather nice. And then we need to come to the Sinclair Spectrum emulator, which by default, and the one installed, is Fuse. Let's load up Zub in Fuse, shall we? There we go, Steve Pickford's familiar loading screen. All good so far. And I think I need to press space at this time. No, nothing works. Nothing works at all. So let's quit out. Try that again. Press the button to configure it. There is no control option. So we have to boot back in and see, it's picked up the Xbox controller, but nothing works. Let's try tubing. We get to the loading screen. You're supposed to press space or something, and nothing works. I'm trying all the buttons on the keyboard with control held down. Everything does not work. Quit out again. Vice works for the C64. I can load up Rodman and it will just work. I might need to tell it that my joypad's in, controller 2 or something, but why doesn't Fuse work off the shelf? And look, right, what you really want to see is how this machine compares against the real hardware. I can't do all the machines, but let's look at the CPC and C64. And this is from Direct Capture. Here's Slice Spy running on the C64 emulator on the Raspberry Pi. It's running on Vice versus a C64C, which granted always has slightly different colours to a bread bin, but that's what I've got out at the moment. You can see there's a slight pixel aspect ratio difference and some colour differences. And this is Synapse running on the Pi on the C64 versus Synapse running on a real C64C. Over to the Amstrad CPC, sticking with Z, and this is Zub running on the Raspberry Pi. And here it is on a real CPC. Evident that there's pixel aspect ratio differences, that for some reason the Pi output looks more stretched horizontally than a real CPC. And here's Synapse running on the Pi versus a real CPC. Emulation's come a long way in the last few years, but the improvements are getting incrementally smaller as the emulation becomes more accurate. It's not a real machine. It doesn't have the vagaries of the outputs of the real machine that gives them that real look. C64 purists will prefer, of course, a bread bin, but there's merits in the C64C output as well. It's sharper, but the bread bin and the real C64 as well as the real CPC, to my eyes, all look nicer, and they've got little visual artifacts they've never managed to emulate. The sound emulation is good. It's still not quite right, but it's far closer than some of these other single-use or single-system systems that we see. So that's a rather long look at the Raspberry Pi. I'm sorry there's not more emulated footage in there, but I can't go over every single machine. The Pi 4 has come along leaps and bounds, as has the Retropie software. It's easier to install than ever. It's easier to use than ever. You will still run into a few problems that you will need to look at in the FAQs on their website, but all the information seems to be there. I dare say I can probably dial out that pixel aspect ratio problem as well. What I can't dial out is the abysmal Spectrum emulation. Please put it in the comments if you've got Fuse working on your Pi, because I can't get it responding to the keyboard. I just can't. These things, all the other emulators work out of the box, and Fuse is just playing up beyond belief. Vice is far better than the version provided on the C64 Mini. The MAME emulation is really good. It still has the vagaries of MAME where you've got to make sure you've got the right system on there, but the game packs are also really good, and apparently you can configure it from the game pack to make sure it loads the right version of MAME every time. And those game packs as well, they are a revelation, because you get all those videos and that text and all the other stuff that you won't have if you load your own versions of games on here. The Pi itself is a remarkable device. Of course, you can run multiple operating systems on there, and it's a real computer. Okay, processing wise, it's not particularly fast. I did some tests in Audacity to normalize 4 minutes worth of audio, and what actually happened is the test when I did it on my Mac took it a blink of an eye. On my Studio Intel Atom PC, silent PC, the operation took 10 seconds, but on the Pi, that took over 40 seconds. Now, that could be the vagaries of the software, But keep in mind that the Pi isn't a processing powerhouse. It's good enough for Retropie. It's good enough for browsing the web. It's got specific hardware to run 2 4K displays. It plays back videos in HD on YouTube perfectly well. I found it could be a little bit stuttery on the 4K stuff, but that might be fixed in a firmware update. I'm not sure. But it seems like a viable basic desktop PC. Certainly better than the Raspberry Pi 2, which was, to be honest, pig slow at some of these things. You could just about use it. In all, the Pi 4 is a massive step forward. It is much more powerful. It runs Retropie far, far better, and it's a really good option for having a tiny, cheap PC under your TV in the living room. Is it perfect? No, it's not. It's still just a little bit too fiddly, but I estimate 75% of these emulators work straight off the bat, and you will never need to do any configuration with them. The other emulators, such as Fuse, need to catch up, and even some of those control configurations on Vice, I'm sure you can tweak that yourself. I just found it by default just too fiddly and too easy to accidentally activate the menus. But these are minor quibbles. Today this seems like the cheapest and best all-in-one emulation system you can get. But will I be ditching all my original hardware for this? Absolutely no way. I'd have to be barking mad to do that. I can load up my C64 far quicker than I can get this thing booted. I can play on my CPC far better than I can get this thing booted. And I'd rather be playing on a real Spectrum than an emulator that doesn't even work. But you may not have the space to do all that. You may not want to own all of those machines. In which case this looks like a perfectly good bet. And it's certainly better than all those trashy single system boxes that we've seen, such as the Mega Drive systems, the C64 Mini. Why would you buy a C64 Mini, which looks like a cheap child's toy, when you can have this that can do everything? It's a little bit more fiddly. You'll need to do more configuration, but you've got the whole world open to you. Think of the C64 Mini as perhaps a train that can only run on tracks and can only take you where the tracks take you, as opposed to the Retropie running on a Raspberry Pi, which is a car where you can basically drive anywhere you want. Okay, you've got to learn to drive, but so you'll need to learn a little bit with this thing, but it seems like such a better bet. And if you buy a Pi 4 today, it's going to be good enough for a number of years yet, so there'll be incremental improvements to Retropie and all the emulators, and I've only scratched on the surface of what I can do with this here today. There's Quake, there's all sorts of other things. There's Riscos. I could go on and on and on. For me, this will become my default MAME box, and hopefully I can be able to record video off this thing for the channel as well. And for you, well, you may have your own uses for it as well. But certainly, I don't regret getting this. I think it's incredibly useful. And I think indeed for most retro users who perhaps just want one tiny box under their living room TV while all their machines sit in their man caves, well, this looks ideal, doesn't it?